Take your seats. It's like herding cats. Okay. Trying to stay somewhat on schedule. So if you want to take your seats, get started here. The flow of the discussion. Councilmember Warwick. Okay. All right. I'm going to make a recommendation for the flow of the discussion, if you will. The gathering today is really to find that consensus, that sweet spot, if you will, around the level of support and advocacy for the areas that have been covered so far in the staff presentations. So I'm going to recommend that we go, not necessarily in that order outside of the first few, but focus on those areas first. Try to find that consensus. From that, once that's wrapped up, I'm not exactly sure when, because there's going to be some ebb and flow to that even, is to move on to the second segment, what I would recommend, those three top key priority areas that came out of those community meetings. Because that's not exactly, especially that streets was not an item on the agenda that was presented, yet it was the most common topic that you all shared with me during our one-on-one meetings. And I think that definitely lends itself, it needs a discussion around it. Do you want to increase funding, all around that. So those three key areas that came out of the community meetings on the budget process. Then the third item, I would say that's the time, and most likely that'll be this afternoon, those items that are not on the agenda, that are not those three key areas, topics that you want to discuss. Some of those may have those staff reports within the packet that you have. They may not be, but trying to give you an opportunity to address what do you want to see are some key priority areas. Several of you shared those with me that are not on the agenda, and we want to make sure that they have an opportunity to be heard by your colleagues to find out what level of support and processing it and trying to understand that. There's a lot of moving parts to these topics, a lot to process. So being able a chance to work at it that way. I hope that will work for the group, sort of segmenting it just to stay focused and not way. Does that sound acceptable? Okay, great, thank you. All right, appreciate that. So the first few items, we want to see if they're the items that the city manager presented this morning. And I'm just going to use the flip chart pad as sort of a talking point document, if you will. Was the city property tax rate. Right. The collective bargaining agreement stance by the council, and the bond timeline. So wanted to see where the council is on these three items. Some of this is just to reaffirm that the current position needs to be essentially validated. The one item that may require a little bit more discussion just based on the flow is the bond timeline. As Cheryl mentioned, some of you had spoken with her that there might be a desire to move that forward. And is there an appetite among council to move that forward, and then the impact from that. So thoughts about the city property tax rate, moving in the right direction, more discussion. I don't want to equate these to sort of the consent agenda, if you will. We want to give you the opportunity to discuss this, ask a question of the city manager, but I don't want to necessarily, poke at things that don't need additional discussion. Property tax rate, yep, Mayor?
I'll just briefly say that I'm comfortable with what was presented in the presentation. I think it's important for us to try and provide some relief, though I recognize that, we're only less than a quarter of the property tax bill, but to the extent that we can provide relief, considering how much the values have skyrocketed, if we're able to do that, I'd like for us to do so.
Okay.
That's my position.
Thanks, Mayor. And I'm going to try to call, do you want me to try to call? That'd be okay? Just because I can see it. Councilman Saldana?
Sure, thank you. And really to second the same sentiment, which is the fact that I think we were all a little taken off foot when we heard from the Bear Appraisal District that they were coming out with their new appraisals. And so a lot of us got calls, probably some misdirected calls, to say that this is something we'd like you all to do something about. And this might be the lever for us to provide that sense of relief. My only question will be, maybe I'll get some input from the city manager here. Because we're looking at two slots of an equation, one of which being the existing assessed valuation and the other being for new construction. If we were to set this tax rate at a point at which is being recommended, would we at least recoup the revenue of what we had last year, for example, to maintain existing services at the same level? We wouldn't take less revenue, we'd be foregoing new revenue. Is that the case?
My recommendation would be that we not reduce the rate so far as to reduce the revenue collected last year. So we're saying collect more, but not as much. Reduce the rate so that we're not collecting quite as much.
Yeah, I think there's a way to do this which is responsible, and I think that's what you've hit at, which is that you still need to be able to collect enough for new construction and the expansion of population and new services and demands on those services. So I would agree with the mayor, and we appreciate that we're having the opportunity to talk about it. Thank you.
Great. I think Councilmember Hadvia, did you have your hand up, did I see? Okay. Councilman Ward?
Thank you. I just don't see how we can reduce property taxes. We have over 526 citizens in our neighborhood association meetings and community meetings that mention things about streets and sidewalks. Why don't we just use the money, the extra monies that we get towards streets and sidewalks, instead of moving that back to a level that we had last year? Whatever additional revenues that we collect, we can add to streets and sidewalks. I didn't hear one thing in our neighborhood association meetings, community meetings, about property taxes on the city side. I heard issues when everything came out, but they understand. I think most of our citizens understand, and I don't think it was brought up during our District 2 community budget meeting, anything about property taxes. It was all streets and sidewalks and, stray dogs and lighting.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councilmember Nirenberg?
Thank you. The conversations I've heard about the appraisals had to do more with fairness and the appraisal process, of which we don't have a whole lot to do with. While I always agree, and I don't think anyone would disagree with the fact that it is always preferable to reduce the burden on a homeowner, especially in an environment where extremely high volatility in our economy and wages have stagnated for years. We should be looking at ways to reduce the burden on taxpayers. I just want to be very careful, though, because last year, this body, we were contemplating a 1-cent tax increase. And the year before that, we did the same thing. And in lieu of that, we tacked on $1 CPS environmental fee that has paid for things that generally we would pay for with property taxes. So I want to be very careful that we go to this process of setting a property tax rate that doesn't put us in a position next year or the year after where we're going to have to potentially raise revenues in areas that are going to be much more difficult to do in a way that's much less transparent. What I would like to do is keep everything on the table, Mayor, but also make sure that we get some very firm numbers back from the appraisal district in later July. Again, reemphasizing, if we can afford to do this, not defer additional things that would be burdens on us later, I will be all for that, but we have to be very cautious about what we do to the future under that scenario. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Trevino, I think you had your hand. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I think with regard to property taxes, as was stated before, I sit on the Bear Appraisal Board of Directors and have learned quite a bit about the process that we go through on a yearly basis. In this case, this was sort of an implementation statewide. A lot of people were experiencing this statewide. And the assessments were calculated by the State Comptroller's office and have recently been addressed in court by the Bear Appraisal District, in which the Bear Appraisal District won all their court cases. So I think it's important to know, like Councilman Nirenberg says, we want to keep everything on the table because there's still some movement here, and want to recognize that there's a lot of information that we still don't know. The property tax rates in San Antonio, in Bexar County, are some of the lowest in the state, and so we want to make sure that we find something that is providing some relief for our citizens here in San Antonio and Bexar County. But at the same time, find that sweet spot. We can't be sort of chasing the tiger's tail here. So I just want to offer, sort of the position that I have with the Bear Appraisal District as a point of information to help work with council, work with the city manager to help, and the mayor, of course, to help further inform and get information in real time as it's happening, because I think that's going to be very important as we address this particular issue.
Thank you, Councilman. I think, yeah, Councilman Lopez?
Yeah, thanks. I think on the effective tax rate, just my comment on that is a discussion we've had several years running. We probably, from a policy, define, what I always refer to, was generally referred to as an effective tax rate, right? What is it today that you have to do to match yesterday's dollar? That, I view it as the effective tax rate, and we always want to get at least what we got last year, right? By policy, we do that. But I think what we need to do is go one step further and set a policy that says to the city manager, over the course of the next 5 years, as you build out the 5-year budget, always assume that it will be the effective tax rate plus or minus some reasonable deviation. We will never lower it more than this, and we will never increase it more than that. In certain circumstances, when we have a tremendous increase in property values, everybody kind of goes, wow, it's a windfall. Well, it's not really a windfall, but it is an opportunity to get more dollars. When we have, and we have had in the past, decreases in those property values, then we say, oh my God, we've got to raise taxes. And I think what we ought to do by policy is simply give direction that says we will always have an effective tax rate. That means we will get a dollar today that we got yesterday or last year, with no more than a plus or minus X% of deviation. That gives the manager a 5-year window or a multiple year window to say, this is how I'm going to do my forecast. Now, if future councils want to increase that, by policy, they could do that. But the way to build, I think, the long-term budget is to set it on some sort of a premise that says, effective tax rate going forward will always be the rule, plus or minus some small deviation. We'll increase it by a little or drop it by a little, but never more than that. If we want to do more than that, then we need to have a whole body discussion about it, maybe even public hearings and the like. And that would be, I think, a good approach to take, and that would be my guidance on it.
Thank you.
But let me, we're
ahead.
going to go.
We're staying on
issue-
property tax.
Stay on property.
Yes.
Then I'm done with property tax.
Thank you, Councilman. All right. Councilman Cryer?
Thank you. I, with all due respect to Councilman Trevino, for whom I have great respect and affection, I have gotten a couple of hundred complaints from residents about the appraisal process this year, most of whom would be thrilled to death to have had a 9.25% increase in their appraisal. For most of them, or many of them, it's been 25 and 30 and 30+%. I am of the opinion, after having watched it for well over a decade, that the Bear Appraisal District is poorly run and poorly led. Mike Asmosquito was invited to a meeting of the homeowners associations in District 9. His answer to every question was, it's the fault of business. You know, if business didn't manipulate the process, we could make up tons and tons of money and not do anything with residents. So none of it is his fault. All of it is business fault. And I have heard that from him year after year after year, to the point that I'm frankly sick of it. I have suggested to the manager, and I've suggested to Councilman Trevino, we need to get that district over to visit with us at a B or other session where we can all talk to them about what the heck is going on here. I mean, to say an average 9.25%, I challenge you to find me some residents in District 10 or District 9 or District 8 who got a 9.25% or less increase. So, A. B, the logical question that we've been discussing is, what do we do with the windfall if there is a windfall? And I think Councilman Lopez has very thoughtfully and articulately laid out the policy questions that are involved in that. I support the mayor on the view that we should look at a budget that reduces that rate. The question is, of course, how much is it reduced? You know, and at the end of the day, it may be more symbolic than significant, but symbols have importance. And I would hope we would do that, because the message that I get from constituent after constituent after constituent, and some of the rest of you have too, is y'all are getting a big windfall out of this. Don't just take the whole windfall and whistle as you go down the road. So there's an education aspect to this. Lastly, and we're going to get to this in a minute, the item that makes this whole difficult is, until we know the price of a police and fire agreement, it's very hard to decide what rate is needed to support it. And so we'll get to that discussion later. But I'm strongly in favor of reducing the rate to some extent, and hope that the manager will be bringing us a proposed budget that gives us some options to do that. And the decision on those options, as you've pointed out, is a policy question in and of itself. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman. I think Councilman Gallagher had something?
Yeah, thank you very much, Patrick. I'll tell you, I have to agree with those comments, Joe. I think that's really important. One of the parts of it, though, and Roberto, this is all your fault, is really this appeals process. We don't know what's coming out of that. And until we really do, you know, it's hard for any of us to sit here and try to make a decision on it. And so I think that's something that we've got to keep a very, very close eye on. And then, of course, as Councilman Cryer just brought up, we do have the problem of the contract negotiations in making that decision as well. Yes, I support any kind of tax reduction we can get. However, we don't have the facts before us right now to make that decision. Thank you.
Councilman Wark, I think you had something?
Yes, chiming on Councilman Nuremberg's point of the $1 environmental services fee that we added on, but we also just saw a presentation on the stormwater fee going up and the variable rate pricing on the trash collection going up. So we also have to look at those things as well, and maybe we could deflect some of those additional costs moving forward. And I know that's not as easy to sell on the campaign trail as opposed to I lowered your taxes, but it is possibly more beneficial to the people of San Antonio, because we're adding fees in all these other places, and yet their taxes are going down, so that maybe they're happy about that, but they may be more economically impacted by what's going on with these other fees.
Yeah. Councilman Vigra?
Thank you, Patrick. Yes, I'm looking forward to having the city manager bring us something with a reduced property tax rate. I think this within the scope of what we have as well, and to make sure that we do have the same revenue that's collected. I will chime in, Councilman Cryer, you're not the only one who has heard the same thing about the leadership at Bear Appraisal District. I have also heard it in my district, in my area, because of the vacant large property of lands that we have in the district still. To see that increase in property appraisals has been shocking. That was shared. And also, as we look at it, I think we do need to make sure that we have some sort of relief for our constituents, because knowing the development and everything that's happening in and along District 3 and the river and the redevelopment that is happening, we need to make sure that our property owners do have some sort of relief that is there. So I'm looking forward to what the city manager will bring. Thank you.
Yes, Councilman Medina?
Thank you. I think Councilman Crowder brought up some really good points, and as well as Councilwoman Villacadon. But I heard loud and clear from my folks over the past few months that I think there's an expectation for us to have an option to provide some property tax relief. And I look forward to seeing what the manager and her team can give us as options. I know, and we all know that we have a lot of needs out there, but I think that it came up loud and clear that there's an expectation for it. So, thank you.
Yeah. Councilman Lopez?
Just a real quick comment. As we start to develop that policy, and you would probably automatically bring this, but I just wanted to, verbalize it. One of those could be as easy as creating some sort of an exemption of X amount of dollars within the property levels. I think there's a lot of people that have this consideration or this concern. Certainly, I do. That it's not a proportionate amount. However, we can offer, as we have at the state level and even at the city level, after you hit a certain age, at 65, you get a $5,000, a $10,000 exemption, and that may be an easier, better way to ease the burden on some that are most vulnerable, yet still being able to do the kinds of things we say, hey, listen, if we have an opportunity to raise dollars, we want to raise dollars to improve the quality of life in our community, but we don't want to do it on the backs of those that can least afford it, and maybe that's an option. I'm not suggesting we should do that, other than we should give it a lot of, I think, deliberative analysis, and that should be something we should consider. That's all I had to add. Thank you.
I have clients all over, and that is starting to be more of a trend where they're looking at a targeted audience for property tax relief, and it's typically an age-based issue. So, other comments from council? Cheryl, do you have direction? Good? Okay. All right. Next one is the collective bargaining agreement. Discussion around that. Just to affirm that the city stance, maintaining the percentage of general fund, 66%. Everybody good with that? Good? Oh, I'm sorry. Councilman Nirenberg?
I don't want to get too far into other items here, but, obviously, there's no secret to anyone. This is the negotiations, the lack of a resolution is a choke point for all of our discussions. A lot of things that have been brought up today, specifically the civilian pay increase, I think need to be taken wholeheartedly. We need to look at that and look at the analysis and consider that. But I think it needs to hinge on a resolution, because, we're talking about workforce wages and benefits. I mean, we need to look at that holistically. So I would like to see us, either a formal policy or not, but make sure that we have that discussion, but make it hinge on a resolution to our collective bargaining agreement. We all need to be working together, and I think that's a way we can ensure that we are. In addition to that, I do want to articulate, we set the 66% policy for council, and I fully support that. We also said no retroactivity, I believe, during this session last year, and I think that's also a policy that needs to be reaffirmed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilman Saldana?
Thank you, Patrick. And really just to reaffirm that this is our position, and the same folks that are to my left and right are the folks that were there really calling for this position before the election and now after the election. A few things I'll point out about the three guidelines or the three guideposts that we have is correct. 66% is one of our policies. So is that around the AAA bond rating. One of them that I wanted to read out here is one that actually changes to the benefit of the police and fire, which is that uniform employees contribute to their cost of health care by paying monthly premiums. That's a big sticking point for us, but we've actually offered in the March 20th proposal one in which the uniform would not pay a premium. So there are ways in which we've actually got away from this, and we've offered that the uniform we would not have to pay premiums, but dependents would, and that is the March 20th proposal. So that is a serious thing that we want to reaffirm through that case, and I think a lot of us are really, I hope, in agreement about trying to resolve this really soon.
Yeah. Thank you, Councilman. Any other comments, or Councilman Cryer?
If I'm not brief, I will owe Councilman Gallagher $1, which is our standing agreement, so I will be brief. As I said yesterday at a really splendid inaugural ceremony, I agree with the thoughtful comments that have been made by my colleagues in support of the position we adopted last year. I strongly support the mayor's position, which she made explicitly clear in 50 candidate forums over the last 6 months. And I support the position of the city manager as the lead of our negotiating team in achieving that agreement based on these conditions, which we all agreed on a year ago, and I agree on today. Thank you, and Mike, I hope I don't owe you $1.
Okay. Other comments? Yes, Councilman Lopez?
Just a real brief comment, just going to echo what the sentiment is when we've agreed that there should be a line in the sand. The 66% was what we've defined, and I think that is, I think, should be the direction that we give to the negotiating team. Just, I think it needs to be said, because I think we all understand that the latitude is in the hands of the negotiating team, and that's led by our city manager. We want to get a deal done that you feel comfortable in. If there were a number other than 66%, there should be discussion, and we do that by virtue of discussions in exec session. I don't know that we should be even getting real granular out here in public about what those contract negotiations are. I think those have to happen with the leadership team that we have, and if there's any deviation to that, we should strategically discuss them in exec session as we have in the past. I mean, it's important that we have a good structure for both the public, for which they have to fund, as then the other side of the public, the service that they request and they require, because it's all about the public and what they pay for and what service they get. And I think we're heading in the right direction. I'm anxious to see what comes out of the next series of meetings, and then we can decide as we go, giving you the full latitude to make recommendations to change our position if we need to. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes. Just a comment before we move on. You know, in local government just in general, but in local government in particular, there is so much interdependency between services. When you talk to a resident, they don't really segment it by department. They just look at their whole experience of living in a community. And I think it's healthy as a governing body to recognize that interdependence between both revenue sources, which you all just discussed about property, the impacts, as well as service delivery. That you're trying to deliver this service and that service, and you're trying to find, as I say, every community has the same ingredients. You're trying to find the right recipe. And I think that recipe is always being subject to additional discussion, subject to change, but trying to find that recipe for success, at least for the foreseeable future, trying to find that right blend. So I just offer a comment about that. So, okay. Next one is the bond timeline. Again, there was discussion by a few of you that wanted to possibly accelerate that to the previous year. Councilman Gallagher?
Thank you very much, Patrick. As far as I'm concerned, I'd like us to stick with the timeline that we have right now. I think that's very important that we don't rush this at all, that we keep in mind what that roadmap is. I could see some huge problems if we do try to rush it, one of them being our AAA bond rating. We've got to be very careful that we clearly map out what that timeline should be. And so as far as I'm concerned, even though we've got some very pressing issues, I'd like to keep it as it is. Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Medina, I think, had his hand up, then Lopez,
Yes,
and then
thank you.
Nirenberg. Yes.
I can definitely understand Councilman Gallagher's concerns, and I think those are well articulated. I would certainly be open to the idea of moving forward, or at least exploring the idea of moving forward to a November 2016 timeline, just because of the fact that of the drainage issues that I have in my community. And right now, we're right in the midst, actually, of sealing channel phases 1 and 2, and my concern is that if we wait too long, that can really have an impact in the flooding and the drainage concerns that we have in that community. So I'm open to the idea. I don't think it would be a huge stretch for us to at least not explore it. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Lopez, then Nirenberg.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. Again, on the timing of it, we have to be very strategic about that and make sure that it gives us the best opportunity to pass it, whether it's November or May. I mean, and what would doom or make it very difficult to pass this is, and it's several things. One is if we haven't finished what we started with 2012. I think it's really important that when we're out there talking about the next bond issue, we say, thank you very much for giving us the money you did. We did what you told us to do, and here is the plan of our substantially completed directive that you gave us authority to build, to bond to, right? So that's going to be the critical point. If we've got a lot of, or the vast majority, substantially completed projects, then we want to consider in November, perhaps that would make it doable. The second thing I think is going to be, that would doom it, if we rush it and don't get the level of input from the community that is broad-based, because that broad-based support is what's going to make us successful. And I would, while I feel pretty confident that the public feels good about what we've done with the money they've given us before, we are really putting the cart before the horse and assuming that they're going to give us that concurrence again. We really need to assemble that committee. We have to be thoughtful about who we appoint, and then wait for what direction they give us. And if they think a November deal is the right thing to do and the timing is right, then we ought to take their lead on it, because quite honestly, those are the folks that are going to help us pass it. Those are the ones that are going to help us craft it. And quite honestly, those are the ones who, help us define what it is that we want after it's all said and done. They're going to decide how many, we probably have $2 billion worth of need out there, and we're only going to get a quarter of that. And they're going to tell us which ones we're going to go out and do. So I'd like to see us try to get to a November date if we could. Sooner would be better. But I don't think we want to rush it to the point of saying we haven't finished the 2012 and we didn't get the extensive amount of input from the community, and therefore November would be out of the question, and we wait till May. But I think beyond May certainly is not an acceptable timetable, because as several people have mentioned, and I'm sure everybody agrees, we've got projects out there that just can't wait. So that would be my input on it. Love to move it up if we think we can, negotiate it, but no later than May for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Nirenberg?
Well, thank you. I agree with everything Councilman Lopez said up until the point where he said we should consider moving it up. I am strongly opposed to that for a lot of reasons. One of them is the precision by which we account for the bonding capacity over 5 years. But also, we're undertaking a very comprehensive effort to align our capital improvement programs. Some of the most important components of that, SA Tomorrow, the comprehensive plan, are going to be coming online later in the year in 2016. We certainly want to make sure that we are aligning those priorities. I think the comprehensive planning process will tell us a lot about what generally the public input has been during the bond sessions anyways, which are what are our priorities for the city. But I certainly oppose moving it up in date, and I hope that we can get all of our planning done before May to get the bond programs completed properly. Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Wark, did you have something?
Yes, I think we do have to think about SA Tomorrow and think about our comprehensive plan. But I do have a slight concern, because we have over 500,000 voters that show up in our November elections versus the 90 to 100,000 or so. So I think we get a little bit more of a consensus from really what the community wants. And we're talking about having people more engaged. So this could possibly engage more people in the city process and talk to more voters. And I venture to say that at least 2/3 of that 520,000 are San Antonio residents.
Councilman Trevino, and then Councilmember. Yes.
Thank you. Well, I too am opposed to speeding the timeline up. I think we've invested a lot already with the SA Tomorrow and the comprehensive plan. I think it's important that we continue that momentum. We continue that purposeful thinking that we have set in place. I think when we're thinking of timelines, speeding timelines up, we want to be careful to not create a situation where we're leaving input out of the system or out of the process. And so in this case, and the timing of this is just not right. I can see potentially looking at a different timeline sometime in the future, but the timing of this may not be right for changing when we actually do this bond. So I'm opposed to this.
Okay. So you're comfortable with the proposed timeline?
Yes,
The
I'm comfortable with
2017.
2017, absolutely.
Okay, all right. Councilmember Villagrán?
Thank you. Just to go on the record, I'm comfortable with the the proposed timeline right now. I think it is, the current timeline, it's prudent, and it also speaks to the points that Councilman Lopez did to make sure that we had community input. And also, I know one thing that we have talked about for several months was about a housing bond. And we want to make sure that if that's able to be a part of this, there are a lot of pieces that need to be a part of that conversation. And we would love to have something of a housing bond even in the 2017, but we're not even sure if that's going to be, we're going to be able to do that. So that's why I think moving forward with this line is prudent and helps us. Thank you.
Okay, Mayor?
Thank you. At the risk of being redundant, I'll just reiterate a couple of the points. I am most comfortable with us continuing on the path to 2017, though certainly I can understand this idea about, more people coming out to vote in a November election. And as I think Councilman Trevino just said, maybe for the future, maybe we need to look at reworking the timeline to try and line up with that for the future. But since we've been on this path, I just think there are too many pieces we need to put in place in order to get to 2016. At the top of the list, of course, for me is the planning process that we're undergoing, and I just want to take the opportunity to frame that for my colleagues, that the whole purpose of us going through this extensive exercise is not just to come up with a pretty document at the end, but for us to have essentially a community-wide policy statement about how we want to invest in order to achieve the collective vision that's articulated through that plan. And so the 2017 bond would be the first and best opportunity for us to make investments in alignment with the plan. And as Councilman Lopez just stated, I think it was a conservative estimate where you said there's $2 billion in need. It's probably more than that. So we know that we won't have enough money to address all the needs. So why forego the opportunity to actually use the planning process, the community process of everyone coming together to guide, how we use the resources that we have, since it will only be a fraction of, what the need is. So I think it's best for us to be very strategic about how we invest those dollars and stay away from the peanut butter approach, which, where you just spread it around. We get some good projects, but do those things help us advance towards whatever our goals are related to growth and development and land use here in our city? So that would be my concern. And when you back up, if you start backing up from November 2016, you got to leave in at least probably 2 months for the marketing. So that means you'd have to have the program pretty solid even prior to that. And it's a pretty short timeline, as Councilwoman Villagran stated. If we want to do this housing thing too, there are a lot of pieces that still have to be worked out, and we'll need more time in order to ensure that we have all our I's dotted and T's crossed before we actually go to the voters with the proposal.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Councilman Lopez?
Yeah, I just wanted to, underscore and echo what the mayor just said. And I think more than anything, I guess the question would be, what did we do last time when we charged the committee? We certainly charged them to review all the scope of all the work that's needed, define what our priorities are, get those $500 or $600 million, which we probably will have capacity for debt on, and we give them all that. Do we also ask them to give us guidance on when the election should be?
No, we have not done that in the past, but it could be
Yeah,
part
and
of the
I- and I think
conversation in the
part of
future.
my
The council's
anxiety
done it.
around saying May, it certainly makes sense, but moving it to November may be something that it would be considered. I would like to make sure that somehow or another, there isn't the concern that was raised. I forgot who raised it, maybe Councilman Work. November seems to be a better demographic for being able to have favorable bond turnout, and that it winds up being the following November or some other later date. I think the urgency of our infrastructure says no later than May should be the case. And I just didn't remember whether we charged the committee with that as well, because I know other bond initiatives in the city, certainly the school ones, they do charge the committee with making a recommendation, and then of course it's up to the council or their boards to decide what to accept. But they also charge them with that, the practicality of but since we don't do that, I would just underscore, let's make sure that whatever we do has some level of urgency to it and not be any later than May. That would be my only concern, so.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you.
Councilmember Saldana had something?
Thank you, Patrick. I don't mean to be a contrarian on this issue, but I do think it's worth mentioning that there are a lot of things, if you have been in this office enough time, where you know the issues that you've been describing to people, saying, look, we will get that done, but we need to get through to 2017 because we can't afford it with any other funds. And having watched this movie before, we passed the 2012 bond, and there is just now a project starting in my district this summer that will be done in a year and a half. So presumably be done by 2017. So that could mean that we pass it in 2017, and the project that I want done, that I've been telling folks we're going to get done for several years, is not going to get done until 2020. So there's this sense of immediacy that I think our public wants from us that Councilman Medina and Councilman Lopez have talked about, which is that, there are some things that we'd like to get done as quickly as possible. And quite frankly, there are things that I don't even think the comprehensive plan will surface, because they're surfaced in my neighborhood associations where I have told them we cannot get to that particular street because it's over $15 million, but we will get to it during the bond. And those are coming from our conversations in our own districts. We could tell you right now where they are before we even publish the comprehensive plan. So that would be my push in saying that we shouldn't automatically say 2017 May is where we should go. And the other reason, because I did bring this up to the city manager, was that you would like to have it in a November election for points that Councilman Warwick brought up. You want to get permission from more people rather than a smaller slice of the city. And that just tends to happen in November because there's more push to get people out. And as we've seen just several weeks ago, that the voter turnout in May is just not what it is. And that's a separate question about maybe aligning these elections. But I think we don't rule that off. We don't put it off the table. And then my question to the city manager is that how long did this process take for us in 2012 and in 2017? Because if we started now, that would give us a year, and it would be July of 2016. So we'd have an entire year to sort of talk about a lot of these things that I think need to come together.
We spent over a year working on the last two bond programs. So we need to do some preliminary engineering. There are projects that could not be funded in the last bond program. And remember, the way the funding works, it's not as if we have $550 million on day one. It's about 100 million each of the 5 years and some denomination of that. So because we don't raise the rate, we have to plan on the growth, and we schedule the projects. In this program, we have 140 projects, and they're scheduled to be designed and built during the course of the 5 years. But it takes over a year because we do some preliminary scoping so that we have the best estimates possible. There are so many needs, as you all know. There are usually 3 or 4 times the amount of projects in value as compared to the amount of money available. And so the committees deliberate and decide what they want to recommend to the city council. And with your input, you appoint the members to each of the bond committees. There are a lot of opinions. What I'm getting from this conversation is that you'd like to discuss it again, and perhaps right after we finish this operating budget conversation and in conjunction with the comprehensive plan development on the progress. So if we were to do something in November of 16, we would need to get going on that this fall. Otherwise, this proposed budget contemplates our beginning the scoping for the projects and developing those lists with you this winter, and then coming to you to discuss the appointment of a committee next summer so they could work in the fall of 17. So we need to start pretty shortly, in short order, if we were to consider a November of 16 election. But we still have some time in September to talk about that before we'd have to make the decision. Doesn't have to be today. But because several of you have brought this up, I appreciate the dialogue today.
See if I could just round out my comments. So all that to say that it probably makes a lot more sense throwing in a sort of curveball in here that we stick to the proposed plan, because of the fact that I think not just that we need to think about having a housing bond, we need to have a housing bond as a component of this 2017 bond proposal. And that's going to require a little more time, a little more insight with respect to the Housing Commission and their work. Because we need to have a serious conversation about the housing bond as a component of this, I think the proposed plan is what gives us the time to do that. So thank you for the opportunity to talk about it.
Thank you. Councilman Cryer, and then Councilman Wart.
Thank you. I remember a bond issue that was so poorly put together that the mayor came out publicly and opposed it, and it failed, which underscores Councilman Lopez's frequent comment that at the end of the day, you got to have a bond campaign that the voters will pass. And that was a long time. That was a long time ago. Yes, so for some of you who may remember, Lila Cockrell was a former mayor. But the point I'd underscore, which some have touched on, sooner is always better than later, as long as, the points raised by you, Mayor, and you, Councilman Nirenberg, as long as it's very thoughtfully put together and it is consistent with the other big picture goals we have for planning and other things. But you have to factor into it that it does take, when you start looking at the calendar, more than a couple of months to put together a coalition of people who will go out and raise $100,000 or so to mount a campaign to educate voters and to build a constituency to pass it. So you can't just put this on the ballot and then a month later hold the election. You've got to back everything up so that we have a reasonable level of confidence that it's going to pass. So as long as you can fold that into the timeline, sooner is always better than later, but it needs to be consistent with those goals.
Thank you. Councilman Wart.
Yes, and I just didn't want to allow my colleagues to forget that the county is working on a housing bond. Commissioner Calvert is really pushing that issue, and they've already started work on that for November 2016. So if we could maybe tack on some of our researchers or see where they are in the process there, that may assist us in, I'm not saying that November 2016 is definite, but it may assist us in making this decision. Thank you.
Just a comment, I think to the mayor's point about the comp plan, governments love to do planning, lots of plans, all sorts of plans. The challenge is how do you integrate those plans? And in some respects, they're sequencing it. Some communities have needs, then they figure out how to pay for them. Other communities have money, and then they figure out what the needs are, right? That's not right or wrong, it's just different. With your street maintenance issues here, that you've all shared with me, that you're talking about today, and trying to look at that bond issue, I think it's trying to segment to say which ones are the most pressing and then which really are bonded, right? You're always trying to kind of segment the dollar allocations for the major ones that probably require a lot more lead time for engineering and design, as well as the other ones where people are looking at essentially out their window and saying, when's that going to happen? Things that are on the smaller scale. So it's kind of a tiering of your capital improvements and trying to figure out, again, to what the mayor had shared, how do you integrate all these needs? It's a good thing that people share with you their desires. The challenge is how you manage those expectations, right? You all know that much better than I do. So it sounds like the proposed bond timeline is supported. Is that fair? Am I characterizing that well? Just want to make sure. Yes? Okay. All right. Good. Moving on, I would suggest now we move on to the items from the staff presentations that were covered this morning. Cheryl?
Perhaps if the council wants to do this, it's 11:45, but we could tackle police technology because we have several items that Eric very thoughtfully presented, summarized this morning. If the council wants to talk about these, whether or not to expedite cams, we have a plan today, but do we want to expedite that? How that is connected to our in-car video system? And then thirdly, whether or not the council wants to proceed with ShotSpotter as a pilot program. We know that the radio issue will go back to the Public Safety Committee. I don't think we need to belabor that here today because that will get more discussion, and Eric summarized that today, but the body cams, the in-car video systems,
And
and
then-
ShotSpotter.
The cops, did you want to talk about that? The funding, the grant funding for additional officers, or?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
It doesn't fall in the technology area,
Right,
but if we
okay.
have time before lunch,
Sure.
but yes, certainly after lunch, if we don't get to it before lunchtime.
It's Councilman Ward?
As far as body cams and ShotSpotter, I think it shouldn't be an either-or situation. We can all, hopefully, if we can't, I'll meet with you, can all understand that there are neighborhoods that are safer than other neighborhoods in our city. And if you're living in one of those safer neighborhoods, I don't see a reason why every person shouldn't be afforded that opportunity. We had a violent shooting last week about a project that I had a meeting about on Wednesday where someone walked out of a gas station, was shot, and ended up dying in the middle of New Braunfels Street. I get a call, or my District 2 office gets a call from 80-year-old senior Estella Salazar, who lives 2 blocks away, who heard the gunshots but didn't call anything in because she didn't know where they were occurring. This is a woman that's heard gunshots numerous times because this is the hot spot of violence for the Promise Zone, Promise Choice neighborhoods. And yet she didn't call it in. A responsible citizen didn't call it in, and that reduced in response time, reduced in potentially saving this person's life. And then a lot of the times, if somebody's not dead in the middle of the street, the police don't show up because nobody calls. So how do we build public trust? How do we get people to vote? How do we get people to be more engaged in what's happening down at City Council and at City Hall is by giving them services that they need in the community. And I think body cams would add to that trust as well, so that when the police do show up, the citizens can trust and understand that there is an additional accountability other than the police officers showing up there. But again, I don't think it should be either or. I'm recalling that the $400,000 was more or less for both sides. I'm definitely adamant about the District 2 project. If the other council people that it represents in Prospect Hill aren't for it over there, that's fine. We don't need 2 areas for a pilot. It's just a pilot project. But I'm definitely adamant about protecting the people of District 2, which had the highest number of gunshots. But I'm also looking at better ways to do the data recording because our police substations aren't on the same track as our council districts. I believe I have 3 police substations, but I only really get the east side data as District 2 data. But there are 3 police substations that serve my district. So I may potentially have a brunt of those other gunshot occurrences in my district going to other stations as well. So that may be something to consider as far as data recording. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Nirenberg?
Thank you. Mayor, when you were councilman in District 2, you brought together that East Side Summit, and I think that we talk about District 2 being in a bit of a renaissance, and the economic benefit to the entire city is pretty clear based on that work that you did. And much of that work was based on public safety. So I'm very supportive of learning to leverage new technologies. I think the body cams are now proven and they're being adopted, and I think we should press forward as quickly as possible. I'm not totally clear on how that works with the dashboard cam and the body cams and how that plays out, but I think we need to, this city should make as strong an investment in technology, whether it's public safety or otherwise, where we can, and I think on body cams for sure. And I'm also supportive of the pilot for the ShotSpotter. I know we had the dialogue at the mid-year budget. We sort of committed to taking this up, or at least talking about it during the fiscal year process, so I'm supportive of that. There was a question there about lease versus own. I think because technology is changing so rapidly, and I think the return on investment on such a new technology for us, it may be widely adopted. We hope that it would be. But the return on investment is as much in the learning from that process as it is on the cost avoidance of owning a system that's nascent technology. I would be supportive more of the lease option. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Gallagher?
Thank you, Patrick. No, I do support your position, and it's ironic, Ron, that bringing up the idea about how technology is changing so rapidly, I think that's really what's driven us with the decision to look at radios again when we're trying to figure that out, because I think that's just hanging over us as a decision that we've got to get made. However, we do have to take all of those sorts of changes into consideration when we're making that decision. But I think we need to all look back at slide 19 that shows that the emergency response time, something to be quite proud of, that San Antonio does really as well it is doing right now. I am, however, supportive of any of these ideas like the shot detection technology to take a look at that as a test and see if that is something that would work. So as far as I'm concerned, what has been presented today is something that I think all of us really are supportive of. I just regret the fact that the public safety radio issue is one that we still have to decide on.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Trevino?
Thank you. I'm very supportive of utilizing technology as a tool, and we certainly want to give all the best available tools to our police officers, because, for them to, in order for them to do their job, we want to make sure that we're providing some of the best tools, some of the best technologies, so that the responsibility isn't sort of left to somebody that may or may not have heard a gunshot. I think that's very difficult to sort of push that responsibility to somebody. I'm supportive of both technologies. In fact, as Councilman Warwick mentioned, District 1 is very diverse, and one of the other spots that Public Safety identified as a potential pilot is District 1. And I certainly think that in order to have a good pilot program, you want to cover a couple areas to see the true effect of a program. So I can certainly support having the recommended pilot program in both District 1 and District 2 to see how that effect could truly transform those neighborhoods. But we also want to bring up to the forefront that the fact is technology is changing so rapidly. We want to address that and ride that wave. So this is really important that we address this right now. ShotSpotter is a current technology. Let's take advantage of it. If in the future there's something better, then we'll talk about it then. I do agree with Councilman Nirenberg's option of the lease. We prefer going to a lease option because technology changes so rapidly. We don't want to be married to one issue. As Councilman Gallagher brought up the radio's issues, is that we sort of get stuck in this proprietary system that then locks us in and sort of disrupts the potential process that we have in place for an RFP or how we go about procuring tools for our public safety officers to do their job. So I am very supportive of these technologies, and I do hope to see it in District 1.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Saldana and then Councilman Cryer.
Thank you, Patrick. And with regard to body cameras, the wave of the future with respect to police enforcement is having police officers equipped with body cameras. I know that for certain. What I don't know is whether the ShotSpotter is going to be the wave of the future. However, I would be supportive of us at least testing it to find out. Mm-hmm. And Councilman Warwick brings powerful testimony that's very real about a piloted area in District 2 that I think is worth investigating. And I wonder if there might be opportunities, because I know that the Promise Zone is not more eligible, but certainly gets an advantage with respect to grant opportunities. If it is a $280,000 spend, if that's something that would be available through funds from the Promise Grant.
Okay. Hold on just a second. Councilman Cryer?
Like Councilman Saldana, I'd like to ride on the wave of the future too, and I hope he'll let me borrow his surfboard for that every now and then. this is a disruptive technology. Both of these are disruptive technologies, and Mayor, in that regard, Uber Lyft is a disruptive technology, and I appreciate your efforts in California this weekend and with the Tech Block folks on that. ShotSpotter is a disruptive technology, and I agree with Councilman Trevino. We don't know yet whether or not it's the wave of the future, which is one reason why, as my father said to me when I got ready to buy my first car, you need to drive before you buy. And the nice thing about leasing is that it lets you drive before you buy. And the second issue, of course, is once you get into a dramatic technology change, every time I've bought into it, the cost it takes you to get into it turns out to be a whole lot less than the cost it takes to stay in it over an extended period of time. We've got a lot of questions on body cam with regard to data storage, data recovery, long-term. So to be clear, I support moving forward on body cams full speed because it's not only coming, it's here. And it's here increasingly around the United States. If we can get into the ShotSpotter issue on a lease basis versus a buy basis, it seems to me that may be a more thoughtful way to do it until we find out whether or not the return on the investment is worth the cost on a longer-term basis. Thank you.
Councilman Wark had something?
On the 2 points that were mentioned, there's some burn grant funding that currently would only be able to cover the schools in the area that we are proposing. So there's a couple elementary and middle schools, Wheatley Middle School being our community school that would get some funding alleviated on the city's behalf from the federal government. But on the next round of burn, we could do something specifically for ShotSpotter, and other cities have done that. As far as Councilman Cryer's comments, again, we are not on the leading edge of this by any means. The U.S. Government has been using this technology since the Iraq War in 2001. It's currently here in a lot of our military bases here in town. If you think of the Naval Yard shooting in Washington, D.C., you wonder how they found somebody in a 6-story building in less than 8 minutes. This technology is in our federal facilities since early 2000s, been in Washington, D.C. since 2005. The thing that's new now is that we don't have to purchase the equipment and have our own staff maintain the equipment, change the equipment, and monitor the equipment. Currently, the subscription system is monitored in Newark, New Jersey, and this is a huge reduction in cost of entry to the technology. This would have been a $2 or $3 million proposal 2 years ago when I believe Chief McManus saw this technology proposed, and now it's a $200,000 technology entry. So it's a huge situation. Again, 90 cities across the country. We would be the first city in Texas, so we would be leading the way in public safety, which I know that many of you are adamant about. And I think it's a no-brainer. There's no reason that my streets in District 2 or Councilman Trevino's streets in District 1 or Councilwoman Gonzalez's streets in District 5 are any safer than, Alamo Plaza or Huebner and 1604, areas where you don't see gun violence. And I think the people of San Antonio deserve the same levels of safety in every part of the city. Thank you.
And a pilot does give you an opportunity to sort of figure out how it works, right? In an isolated district, that's the benefit of doing pilots. Work the bugs out, how do you operationalize it? How does the police department utilize that as a technology, as a tool for response time and dealing with all those issues, as opposed to going citywide and then you're sort of, everything is out there, So when we're go ahead, Councilman.
Just to move forward, I am in support of moving forward with the body cameras on the basis that we have right now to keep moving forward. When coming to this pilot program, I'm glad to know that there's a lease option here with this. I think that's very important because I do understand that many of the federal buildings in DC do have these ShotSpotters already on there. So that's part of that cost. And so what we're looking at is about $280,000 to up to 1.7 million. Eric, why is that up to 1.7 million again?
He's coming up right now.
primarily, Councilwoman, and you can take both those numbers and divide them in half. It's for the, for one proposal, the subscription-based and cloud storage, the $280,000 proposal, it's $140,000 per pilot area. The primary driver of the increase in cost in the other proposal is that we're actually purchasing the equipment, and we're actually going to have, we would actually have to provide storage, our own data storage locally through our IT services. So it's really a comparison of new technology using a subscription-based formula where you don't own the equipment and you're paying somebody a set amount per month to hold that data for you in the cloud versus us having to buy the equipment and the servers to maintain all the equipment, all the storage.
Okay. All right, thank you. And I think, how many pilot programs are we offering up this year in our budget? Just in general in our different departments that,
Let me total that during the lunch hour, because we do have a number of pilot programs.
okay.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's just something that I want to be sure to take a look
Right.
at when we move forward as well, because I think that's very important. So, I mean, but if we are looking at leasing and it's not going to be 1.7 million, I think the pilot is something to pursue because technology is moving the way it is. So, thank you.
Councilman Lopez?
Yeah, and I would like to just have somebody, maybe Eric, talk to the, obviously, if we implement this, whether it's pilot or permanent or citywide, it's going to generate more calls. And so what, outside the numbers that were up there, up to $1.7 million, and what's the manpower requirement? Obviously, it's going to generate more calls. It's going to generate more information for us to take action on, which is a good thing, right? Because we'll be able to identify it. But that means then we need to have more officers. And so what are those costs that are associated with it? I would imagine we'd be able to find trending information from other cities. So when we put this in, our call rate went up by X percent. Therefore, we need X or Y percent of more head count there. And that probably would be a good thing to insert into that formula. Because quite honestly, it's like anything else. I mean, we can buy technology, and we all agree technology makes life a lot easier, but if we don't have the resources to react to what technology tells us, then it's wasted dollars. It's much like that stationary bike that's in my bedroom, that great technology, I just don't use it very much, and therefore it's pretty well wasted. But it is great technology. But I'd like to see, so what are the other, related based on data from other cities that have implemented it? Is that going to track with us? So I think that'd be good for our pilot program, component of it. So if you can talk to that a little bit.
So yeah, that's a great point, Councilman, and I think what we've seen is that in some cities, the call load in that area has increased because of folks who hear something but assume somebody else is going to call the police. But that has not been the case in every city. Part of the recommendation that we made to Public Safety in April was that if we do the pilot for 1 year, we would report back through Public Safety and ultimately the council on what has been the impact. There may be, and that's one of the reasons why the police department identified 2 areas of town with the highest number of gun violence crimes. We may see an increase in calls in the area. We may not. We don't know. But we wanted to make sure that if we're going to pilot the technology, that we do it in the areas of town where we have the highest crime related to guns. And that'll be part of the data tracking and reporting back to the council. I mentioned earlier, we redraw the patrol districts. We did that in January 2014. It hadn't been done in 15 years. And that's kind of a constant management tool at the police department. It could be that we redraw the patrol lines. It could be a manpower result where we need to take a patrol district and split it in two and add an officer and make an area smaller. But there's been different results in different cities, and we'll have to see how it fares out for us.
Councilman Wark had something, and then Medina?
No, in Washington, D.C., it's really just, it tells you where the police need to be before the shots happen. And that's one of the great things that you have with the technology. We're never going to have enough police officers to be on every street corner or walking the beat like they used to when our cities were more urban. But now you know where to place your resources before the shots occur, which nights have the most shots occurring, so you know that Friday night around 3, from 3 a.m., you have to have police right here, versus, Sunday morning at 9 a.m., maybe you don't need police in that area because shots don't occur. So it's able to tell you this kind of data. It's able to tell you which day of the week is the most dangerous as far as gun violence, so you may up your levels of police on that day. So it's very data-driven, and it's a scientific method as opposed to a political method to really make our streets safer and increase the presence where the presence is needed.
Thank you. Councilman Medina?
Thank you. I just also want to echo, I think it is important that we do explore the pilot program for ShotSpotter, as I said a couple of weeks back during our mid-year review, but with the emphasis that we also look at the west side as well, and I think that's going to be important. So just wanted to echo that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cheryl, are you clear with what the direction is? So, okay. I'm going to go ahead and suggest that we're running just a little bit behind, but that's okay. I'm going to suggest we break now for lunch, which is in the room next door. Help yourself over there, and then let's reconvene at 1:05. Is that good for everybody?
Mayor, we have a birthday.
Yes, I would like to just make 2 acknowledgements. First, I wanted to acknowledge that Councilwoman Gonzalez, I understand, is watching on Nowcast, so a little shout out to her and the baby at home. And then also today is Councilwoman Villagran's birthday, so everybody please give her a birthday hug on your way over to lunch. And we have some cake to share to celebrate her special day. Thank you.